Welcome to the MaYapinion Podcast, the leadership podcast for women. This is a show that focuses on leadership, life, and love to empower women around the world to be the leader of their life. The MaYapinion Podcast is a weekly show with Maya's Motivation Monday, focusing on leadership topics for women that feature guest interviews as well as solo episodes with Maya. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the MaYapinion Podcast on your favorite podcast platform. Now, in her opinion, here's your host, Maya Roffler.
Hello. Welcome back to the MaYapinion Podcast. I am so excited to be coming to you in 2023 and sharing some incredible updates on the MaYapinion Podcast and about the MaYapinion Podcast. So, as most of you know, this podcast originally started in early 2017. And when we started this podcast, I had been on a reality show and I was sharing my opinion, exactly what the brand is, about my experience on reality TV, behind the scenes, what had happened in my life, which I lost my brother, and it was devastating for me, and kind of took the veil off of what it was like to go through that entire experience, not just reality TV, but my loss, my journey, and everything that went along with it. And my co-host and I had a couple incredible seasons talking about these experiences and giving my opinion. But I knew I didn't want to talk about that forever. I didn't want to talk about a dating show forever, but I wanted to share my life. So I kind of put things on pause and I relaunched the MaYapinion brand as a leadership podcast. And I did this because I wanted to provide a podcast and create a podcast that is something I would have listened to when I was 22 years old, walking into corporate America, and had zero clue what I was doing. And as I've shared throughout the past couple years, as we relaunched in late 2019 as the Leadership Podcast, I've opened up my heart and soul and shared these stories as much as possible with all of you. The mistakes that I made in corporate America, the wins, the fails, things I wish I knew, and I'm so grateful for this journey. It's been incredible, and I hope you have gotten a lot out of my stories that I've shared. And the reason I focus on leadership is because I was thrown into a leadership position at such a young age. And I wished for something like this at that age. I was getting advice from some incredible mentors, which I've shared on the show. But I want to hear from me. And when I say me, I mean, I wish I had heard from the me version back, 15 years ago, 14 years ago, whatever. So that's why I created version 2.0 of the MaYapinion Podcast and gave my opinion, switched from reality TV because I didn't want to talk about that forever, but I switched over to talk about leadership because I knew a lot about it, still know a lot about it, have led really large teams at a young age, and wanted this for myself years ago. So I imagine that there were women out there that wanted this too. And that's absolutely the case because the podcast has done extremely well. And I want to thank all of you for listening to it. But I realized something as I was going through the past year, literally the exact year mark, when I launched episodes throughout 2022, which were not as frequent because of my other podcast that I have and also kind of rediscovering the brand. I was still giving my opinion, but I was attracting more women that were entrepreneurial, women who left the corporate grind and had this story, and it was extremely inspiring, not only to myself, but to a lot of our listeners, to all of you. So I'm here to tell you that it's been an incredible ride. I have loved doing these past few seasons about leadership, and that's not going anywhere. Leadership is a part of every single woman's life. Being the leader of your life is so important, and I stand by that. But I realized my passion was really in the entrepreneurial experience. And I was giving my opinion a lot on being an entrepreneur. So I'm excited to announce that we are taking the show in a slightly different and new direction and evolving it into the entrepreneurial podcast for women. And I am thrilled about that. So it is going to be the Entrepreneur Podcast for Women. And as we've been speaking to women in leadership positions and women who have come on the show, and as I've shared my own story, we've heard countless stories of women who have not only shattered the glass ceiling in their respective fields and beyond, but have also taken a leap of faith and started their own businesses. And I started to notice that pattern. So these women are not just leading teams and potentially their own company after leaving a company, but they're paving the way for the future generations of us, female entrepreneurs. And we want to showcase this and support their stories and share their journeys, and that is my mission going forward. I'm still going to share my opinion. I'm still going to share my stories, but I just noticed that we naturally shifted that way. And so the podcast needs to reflect that in our messaging. So that's where we're going in 2023 and beyond. And you may be wondering, well, what does that mean for you? Well, I started my entrepreneurial process really when I started this podcast back in 2017. I had dipped my toe into the entrepreneurial world, being an entrepreneur, a couple different things. I've talked about it on the show often, but now I'm going to share my story completely of how I left the quote-unquote corporate grind, corporate America, all of that good stuff, and share my evolution into entrepreneurship and why I own not just one company now, but more than one company and more than one podcast, how I did it, and demystify this idea for all of us, especially us women here that watch on social media and people say, quit your job, follow your passion, follow your dreams. Okay, great. How? How do I do this? So really, the point of this podcast has always been to give my opinion, but it's also been to solve a problem. And I shared my experience about leadership, and that's going to be woven into this naturally because you're still a leader and leadership is extremely important in entrepreneurship. But I want to dig deeper and I want to give my opinion about entrepreneurship. I want to share with all of you exactly what I've done, the things that I've failed at, which are a lot. I want to share with you the things that I'm winning at and how I got there. I'm talking as nitty-gritty as I'm going to talk to you about how you build a brand. How you have a dream? Great. What's that dream? How do you follow that? How do you figure out if your dream is worth chasing? I think it always is, but sometimes you have to evaluate. How do you start at the end to start at the beginning? You find out what a problem is and you figure out how to solve it. How do you build a brand that represents what you're trying to do? I'm talking about as nitty-gritty as talking about the colors you select. What kind of media do you do? Do you use marketing people? How do you bootstrap? Do you get investments? Where do you start? It's very overwhelming. It was extremely overwhelming for me. And in my opinion, this is something we need to talk about. We need to demystify how you actually start your own business and what are the steps. And this is something I actually help with. This is something I mentor people on. I'm a coach with this. I am hesitant with the word coach, but I am one. And I help people launch not just their brands, not just their podcast, but something that's viable for them to move forward. That, in my opinion, is my strength. Those are the people that I work with typically. And that's what I want to help you with here on the My Opinion podcast, because in my opinion, it is so important and imperative that women are financially independent. And whatever that means for you, whatever dream that is for you, we're going to talk about it here on the My Opinion podcast, in my opinion, and bringing on incredible women who have paved the way, are paving the way, and are doing incredible things and have jumped into the entrepreneurial space. And they are going to be from all different backgrounds. But before we do that, I am going to share with you in detail, again, my entrepreneurial story, all in my opinion, and then we'll bring those incredible women on to give their opinions about entrepreneurship and share their stories. So we'll still be talking about my opinion, but we're going to be talking about something that I think every person is chasing in one way or another, entrepreneurship. And we're going to talk about the challenges that women face because they're very different. They're very different than what men typically face. And we face challenges and obstacles like lack of funding, lack of mentorship, and cultural and societal stigmas. So our goal with this show is to help women overcome all of these barriers and empower all of you to build the business or career and or of your dreams. So taking those dreams and creating actionable steps so you can implement them, whatever that is for you. So yep, we're going to talk about branding. Yes, we're going to talk about how to create a plan, how to put those dreams and thoughts onto paper. We're going to talk about how I failed, what I wish I had done. Yes, we're going to talk about how to register an LLC. We're going to cover all these topics right here, all in my opinion, on the MaYapinion podcast. So I hope you'll join us with our relaunch and our focus on entrepreneurship for women. And of course, leadership will still be in the mix.
Thank you so much for listening to the MaYapinion podcast. You can catch up on past episodes on the MaYapinion podcast website at www.myopinionpodcast.com, as well as read the MaYapinion blog and contact Maya directly with your questions. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at MaYapinion Podcast and Maya Roffler. We'll see you back here next week.